Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Teams for Business. I'm your host, Kywin.
I'm Jackie.
And I'm Jack.
I'm so glad you could join us today. Today, we're going to be discussing whether or not businesses should prioritize environmental sustainability, basically over their own monetary gains. And there's a lot of controversy around whether or not they have like the ethical obligation to do so to minimize their negative impact on the environment, basically kind of contribute to broader societal well-being. So first part, we're basically just going to be having a discussion, and then just to dive right in, I guess, what do you guys think are the key factors that businesses consider when making decisions about like sustainability and then profitability as well when they're trying to make money?
Yeah, I think like this is a really complicated topic and there's like a bunch of like business, morals, things going on. But I know like one of the, I guess, like indicators or things that they consider is like ESG type things or like sustainability. So ESG is like environmental, social, and corporate governance. And so like, these companies kind of just like look at those things and like try to make it as well as they possibly can for society, like within a reasonable limit, of course, for their business. And a lot of what happens is that like with sustainability, I know like it like the whole definition like refers to like as much as the business can do to be like good for like the environment, could be good for like society, etc., without like adversely hurting their business. I know like a lot of companies are willing to like have like these kind of standards, but definitely I don't think that there would be a lot to like use these standards if it actually hurt their business. And I know there's like debate about this, but I think there was a Forbes article that came out and it actually was like sustainability isn't necessarily bad for a business and like it can potentially help that company. So I think that's always like something really interesting to consider, how it's not like so much binary in the sense like either you're good for society or the environment or you're making money. Like a lot of the times like being green or like having those practices in place actually can help the company. I know like a lot, just like from personal experience, I know like a lot of like cosmetics company are like cruelty free or like like green brands, and like that actually encourages more like customers to go to them because like, oh, like they have a really good cause, I'm going to support that cause, and that actually brings them more like money and revenue. So it doesn't always like have to be like so much of a binary thing, in my opinion.
Yeah, so definitely I think ESG is one of the key factors. Like some companies are assigned ESG scores and like investors and stakeholders can use those to gauge maybe what a company could like do in terms of like social impact in like the future in terms of like the environment or like DEI practices, for example. Another key factor that I'd like to mention is potentially the cost of switching to a sustainability model. Like if you go from a normal like regular model like what you've been doing to like sustainability, like sustainable, more sustainable models right now are probably like, I guess, like more high tech, which also means that there are going to be more costs that come with it. And I feel like also switching to sustainability could be risky because like even if the current like business is somewhat doing well, the sustainability it still needs like a little bit of like testing to see whether it could work within the context of your business and also in some cases if it aligns with like the business ideals. So definitely think that potential costs, switching costs, and also in terms of like if the sustainability like changes like align with the company values, those are also two like key factors that businesses should typically consider when making decisions about profitability and sustainability.
Yeah, definitely agree with both of the points. I personally think that like yeah, switching to sustainable practices may have like a financial impact at first, but I think that they can lead to like cost reductions over time just because like by being more sustainable you're kind of wasting less and then you're like reducing the energy you're using as well, which is like you're optimizing basically your resources, which can save you money in the long run. But there's definitely going to be like financial hits in the beginning when you're first trying to make your company more sustainable and like hit the higher ESG scores. And yeah, I guess, do you guys think whether like business is trying to prioritize short-term profits over like long-term environmental sustainability, is that justifiable?
I think like obviously every case is different. Like you might have like scenarios where like what I'm saying isn't the case. But I think as a whole, like short-term profits versus like long-term environmental things, like I just don't think it's like worth it because I mean, of course, like it depends on like what type of company you are and like what like sector it's in. But if we're talking like retail, if we're talking like consumer focused products, then it's like it doesn't really make sense to prioritize like I mean, I guess it does make sense, but I think like ethically and morally it's better to prioritize like a long-term environment and long-term like societal gains, because like I know we're talking about environment here, but like ESG also incorporates like not just the environment but also like other practices as well. So like there's things that like a company can do without hurting like profits at all, like being more inclusive, being more like equitable, like that doesn't really hurt the company like in terms of like money. Like but yeah, that you might have like to spend a little bit more on like trainings, things like that, but like if you're hiring like more diverse staff, like that doesn't really hurt in terms of like your profit and loss statements, like that doesn't affect anything. But I think like generally if we're talking about the environment though, it's still like not as worth it to prioritize short-term profits because first of all it's like short term, and like we previously mentioned, in the long run like you might actually be saving money, so then it's like long run versus short run, which is, and it's still better to do like long run anyways. So I think like in my opinion for most companies out there, like obviously there's specific sectors where like that this might not be the case, things like that, but in general, especially for like consumer based, like consumer focused products and services, I think it's more like worth it to focus on long term like benefits to society and the environment.
Yeah, I definitely agree that like if you like focus on long term like sustainability, you can get like more of like I guess an environmental and social impact on both sides, which can like not only help you like sustain your business in the long run, it will just also like make you like attractive to like stockholders and just make your environmental impact like it'll make your impact on the environment like I think better. But I can see why some businesses do prioritize short-term profits. Like sometimes, oh, maybe if you want to like produce something that's like used in like terms of like for example, like masks. Like some people when there's like factories that are like producing masks and sometimes they cause like a little bit of pollution. I don't think you would sacrifice those like long-term like sustainability by switching to like maybe a more greener factory because these masks can like help save lives, can help protect people from like the contagious diseases that are out there in the world. So definitely those are definitely especially in the medical industry there are special cases where short-term profits over long-term environmental sustainability is justifiable. And in also some cases, as I just mentioned in the first question, long-term environmental sustainability does come with some costs. So if the businesses don't have enough like money to like make a switch or makes like different decisions to make such a switch, as like maybe the environmental sustainability practices are maybe risky and could cause the business to lose a lot of profits. So it could in those cases it could be justifiable to prioritize short-term profits over long-term environmental sustainability. But also there's also a lot of like companies that are like really appealing to mostly like a consumer background that could probably benefit greater from prioritizing long-term sustainability.
Yeah, I think just like Jack and Jackie mentioned, it's more of like a case by case basis. I think for smaller businesses that may like be struggling and they need kind of like short term profits to stay alive, then like in those scenarios, or like yeah, in the medical field, when there's a need for short term profits to create jobs and whatnot, then yeah, I have no problem with that. But for like larger companies, I think it's even in your best interest as a large company to kind of make sure you're viable in the long term. And like in terms of brand reputation as well, like these factors in trying to become more sustainable, they're all gonna benefit you as a big company for, or even like medium-sized companies for trying to prioritize for the long term. And yeah, I just think that not only will it help you, you also do have like an ethical and social responsibility as a company to kind of like try to preserve the environment for the long term. And just moving on to the next question, I think that we should discuss whether or not kind of like the broad discussion topic about whether or not like businesses should prioritize environmental sustainability like over their own monetary gains. Like what are some like cons to that idea, I guess? Like why should businesses what scenarios would businesses be prioritizing their monetary gains over like for the short term, I guess?
Yeah, I think like there are definitely circumstances where like it just wouldn't make sense from a business perspective to be like incredibly sustainable, incredibly green. And like I think those cases are fine. Um and because like for a lot of businesses, like they exist, like their point is to make money. So and like I think that is fine because that's always going to exist. I think the issue is more so like when it's like a little bit dramatic, like it's like bad for like horrible for the environment, and then they're making like a bunch of money and they could be doing things. But there definitely are cases, like for instance, if it's like there's like certain sectors where it's a lot more difficult, a lot more like time consuming, a lot more like resource inefficient to be as green as like another industry would. So I think like as long as a company can be trying like having like a lot of money put into like R&D to like have more equitable or like more sustainable practices in, but like currently like at the moment they aren't like that sustainable. I think that's also fine because you can't like just expect companies to like boom suddenly be super green, super sustainable. So I think like those cases are definitely fine. And then also cases where like pandemic where that was like literally just super unprecedented and no one knew what to do. I think I like read these articles before where like ESG practices, like whenever something bad or like something unexpected happens or like the economy goes down, like ESG practices are always like one of the first things that go out the window. And I think like while it is important, like companies need to be careful on like how much they decide to like stop those practices, like sustainability practices. I think like it is excusable like if you like stop a little bit, like you prioritize profits, because otherwise like yeah, okay, you're sustainable, you're green, but like if you're not making money, your business is going to shut down anyways. So like I think prioritizing like the lifeline of the business itself is always important, but I think it's just like being green and being sustainable is like when that becomes very important and like something to like actually think about is like when you're making already a lot of money and you're like, okay, well, I could be doing something good for the environment.
Yeah, I definitely agree that like in the current like circumstance, I guess like businesses can prioritize more like ESG practices since we just recently exited out of the recession. We're pretty much out of the pandemic as of now. But like before, like during like different like crises and stuff, when businesses had to actually like sustain their business, then the ESG practices may be like on the lower priority because the the major priority and what always comes first is to sustain the business. And sometimes some companies may make the mistake of like prioritizing like the social impact. In this case, it could be ESG practices, it could be prioritizing environmental sustainability. But if they leave the profits in the dust, like then or if they leave the business aspect of it in the dust, like and if they allocate so many of their resources towards like doing environmental or just giving an environmental social governance impact, like they could eventually have no impact at all if their business just dies.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that yeah, in those cases where like trying to preserve sustainability isn't like possible, then there's no point for these small businesses to like to basically kill themselves. I don't think that's the right word, but like they're sacrificing their own like the company basically just for sustainability. There's definitely cases where sustainability isn't the top priority, but I guess when businesses get to the point where they can try to be more sustainable, but like what do you guys think are some like common challenges that businesses encounter when they're trying to prioritize being sustainable?
I think like again it depends like the type of company, but like I know like sometimes sustainable practices are more expensive for like operations and like their for just like their costs as a whole. And if you're like a smaller business or like you're just starting up or like you're having like other financial issues, like that additional cost might be like a lot for your business to handle. And then it's like kind of difficult. Like what do you do with that? And also like expensive costs, then you can't like do other things. Like you can't make new products, or like you can't produce as much, things like that. So that's kind of where like it becomes a bigger issue. Another point like I was thinking of, not so much like related to this question, but as a whole, also, I don't think it's like so much of a company, like, is a company sustainable? Like, yes or no. It's not like a binary yes or no thing. It's more of like, is this company like doing this to help the environment? Are they doing that? Like, I don't think they have to be like 100% sustainable, like in every single way possible. I think like they should be trying to be as green as possible, but like they don't actually have to be like every single step of the way, like sustainable. I think it's more of like specific parts of it, and then like as time goes on they're like increasing their sustainability, but I think it's unrealistic, or for like most companies to be like, yep, I'm 100% green, guys. Like that just doesn't, that's not going to work for most companies, and it's not realistic to expect that for most companies. So I think that's definitely a consideration in the fact that it's not like, yes, you're sustainable, or like, no, do better, you're not sustainable. It's like, you're doing these things, great, like what else can you do? Or like, you're not doing these things, you should probably do some of these things, kind of type atmosphere.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I'm gonna just go off of Jackie's second point. Like sometimes like there are a lot of companies that make like that specialize in some industries, and those industries maybe like it could be like more difficult to go like, I guess, like green. So like for example, I could say like, oh, Amazon, like they, when they have those like shipping costs, they have to like use like transportation that may contribute to like, I guess, like pollution in the air, such as like trains or like a lot of like trucks on the highways. Amazon have been making efforts to improve on their sustainability. They've suggested electric trucks, but so far it still remains pretty difficult to like see a greener solution. So overall, that would go to my like point that like there's like certain limits where like the environmental like sustainability can like reach, but once those limits have been like reached, they can't go any further unless they're gonna like lose a lot of like profits. But then going back to the first question and adding on to like Jackie's first point, like I think that potentially like businesses may have to deal with an uncertainty about switching to potentially a more environmental greener solution, because it's still like pretty new. It's still like in like, I guess, a little bit of a testing phase, even though a lot of like companies have already implemented some like sustainability practices, but you just don't know how much your company is gonna like how much your company is going to gain from these like sustainable practices. The company might even suffer from these environmental like sustainability practices that may be introduced. So it will definitely take time. And if you don't have the resources, or like the if you don't have enough like profits to like pursue those like environmental sustainability without like, if you don't have like that much like margin of like air for environmental sustainability, and maybe you shouldn't go for it, and maybe prioritize more of the business first. And once you get a larger profit margin, maybe you can go experiment with environmental sustainability.
Yeah, definitely. I just think that like a large part of why businesses can't like prioritize sustainability is because they don't have the monetary means to do so. And I do think that businesses, like once they get to a certain point, they do have like an ethical responsibility, which is why we have like ESG scores and everything around that. So from here, I think this is where we'll call part one of our sustainability in business discussion. And make sure to check us out in the next part two, where we're going to basically be debating the importance of prioritizing environmental sustainability.